Okay, we're going to look at page 2 now. So with page 2, we're doing more with the arithmetic and the geometric, and we're trying to identify different things. We'll also use the formulas, and the formulas you can find on your practice test on the bottom of the back page. Okay, those formulas will also be on the bottom of the back page of your test, so you'll have them for your test also. Okay, so when we look here, identify each sequence as arithmetic or geometric. So that's the first thing that we want to do. Then determine the common difference or the common ratio. So if it's arithmetic, there's going to be a common difference. If it's geometric, that's when you have a common ratio. So we want to try to figure out what these are. And there's different ways that people go about doing it, but really you're just trying to see if you're adding the same thing each time or subtracting. That means you're just adding a negative. That's arithmetic. And with geometric, it's when you're multiplying. Or if you're dividing, that's the same as multiplying by a fraction, like 1 over whatever you're dividing by. So sometimes you'll see that. So when we look at these with fractions, I know sometimes people have trouble. So we're trying to figure out if it's going up or down by the same amount each time. And if that's the case, it's going to be this. Or if we're multiplying by the same thing each time. So I think looking at the multiplying here first is a little bit easier because you can see from the first one to the second one, if we multiply by -1, it would get me here. But that's not consistent. It doesn't do the same thing from here to here, multiply by -1. So it's not geometric. And it doesn't say it could be neither. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to say it's arithmetic. Because at least I got part of it done. So you're trying to figure out what you're adding. And if you notice, it's going down as we go from one step to the next. Okay, it's getting smaller each time. So when I'm finding my common difference should be negative. If it's not negative, then you're doing something wrong there. And you're trying to figure out how much it went down. So if you start on the number line here at positive 1/3 and you go down to negative 1/3, you have a third on this side and a third on this side. So it's going down by 2/3 each time. And some people have trouble with that. Another thing that you could look at is if you have your calculator. So I'll grab my calculator here, and you can find what that difference is. Remember, it's a common difference. Oops, so I'm going to clear out what's in here. And if you subtract these, it'll tell you. So if I take the second term, -1/3, so to do -1/3, I put a parenthesis, -1 divided by 3. And then I subtract the 1/3 that's in the front. So I subtract parentheses 1 divided by 3. It's going to give me this decimal, which is okay, but the fraction's better. If you switch and you go math here and hit enter for fraction, it'll switch it to a fraction for you. And you can see that that's your common difference. So we end up with the same answer that I have up here. Okay, so we might jump to that calculator on occasion. All right, then looking at the second one over here, the first one was arithmetic. Maybe this one's geometric. Let's check that first. So if it is geometric, that would mean that you're always multiplying by the same thing. So when we look at this here, if I'm going from here to here, I would multiply by 4 to get there. And then you want to see if that's the same. Do I multiply by 4 to go from here to here? And then 4 to go from here to here, and the answer is yes, right? So if we're always multiplying by 4, that is your common ratio. So our R is 4, and if we're multiplying, then we say it's geometric. All right, then when we look at number 4 here, it says determine the 30th term of the sequence. Now they already give us the formula, so we don't have to grab the formulas off the back quite yet. And the 30th term, that would mean that the nth term would be 30. So our n is equal to 30 here, so we're trying to find a sub 30. And the A just means it's arithmetic, and this should follow along with your arithmetic formula if you're glancing at the formula there. But all we're doing then is we're plugging 30 in where we see n. And then that's going to give us our answer, so you can just type that into your calculator, and you should get 134. All right, then moving to these ones, we're trying to write the explicit formula, and on the back page of your test, that's where those formulas are, so I'm going to go ahead and drag that out here. I just took a picture of it. So we want to write an explicit formula, so make sure you're looking at the explicit formulas here. So the explicit ones would either be this one if it's arithmetic, or this one if it's geometric. Okay, so first we want to figure out whether it's arithmetic or geometric. I feel like part B is a little bit easier because it doesn't have the fractions. People tend to like those a little better. So if we look at this one and we're trying to figure out whether it's arithmetic where we're adding or geometric where we're multiplying, you can see from here to here, and maybe it's harder to see here and we want to start towards the end. Okay, I can see that I divided by 2. Is that consistent each step? Divided by 2, that looks good. Divided by 2, and then you can see it. So it's always dividing by 2. Now dividing by 2 would be geometric, so I'm going to write that because letting my teacher know I know something is always a good thing. Okay, so we've got, it's geometric, but then we're trying to find what the R value is because we're going to need that to write this down. So if we're dividing by 2, a lot of times people say our R is 2, but remember it's dividing by 2. So if you're dividing by 2, the 2 actually goes underneath that, and we're actually multiplying by 1/2. So your R value here would be 1/2. And if we're using this formula, so I'm just going to write the generic formula here to start with. That way my teacher can see that I chose the correct formula, which is something. And then I'm going to leave n in the formula because that's part of it. And I'm going to replace this g sub 1. This means it's the first term of a geometric sequence. So we're just looking for the first term, which is 96. And then we plug our r in here, and our r was 1/2, and I always put that in a parenthesis. And then we raise that to the n minus 1 power. So we should still have g sub n over here, we should still have the n here, but we're replacing those two pieces. So this would be my answer then. It's just writing the formula. Okay, and if that was geometric, this one might be arithmetic, but we'll find out. So we're trying to figure out what we're adding or multiplying in order to answer this question. And if I look from here to here, I notice the denominator is the same, which makes it a little bit easier. So with the denominator being the same, I would have to add 4 on top. So if I add 4 6, if I have 1/6 and I add 4 more 6, I'm going to have 5 6 total. So I'm thinking if it's arithmetic, and I'm not sure if it is yet, that my common difference is going to be 4 6. So 4 6 is the same as 2/3 if you reduce that down. So maybe that'll work. So let's see if that works for the next step from here to here. So if we start with 5 6 and we add 4 6 to it, we end up with 9 6 total. And if you reduce that down, 3 goes into the top 3 times, 3 goes into the bottom twice, and it matches, right? 3/2. So I feel good about that. So I was at 9 6 or 3/2, and then if I add 4 6 again to that, so let's see if I take my 9 6 and I add 4 6, I would get 13 6, and that's what I have there. So I feel good about writing that it's arithmetic, and I've got my common difference there. Okay, now a thing that you can do in your calculator, if you struggle with that, is you can take the second term and subtract the first term. So your second term there was 5 6, and you can subtract the first term, which is 1/6, and it's going to give you what that common difference would be. Again, you can click that math button and switch it to a fraction so that you have your answer in fraction form. So 4 6, I'm going to rewrite that as 2/3 because that's what that would reduce down to. Okay. All right, so let me rewrite this as 2/3. And then I'm going to grab my arithmetic explicit formula that's right here, and I'm going to write that down as is to start with. And then I'm going to plug in my a sub 1, and a sub 1 is just your first term of an arithmetic. So our first term was 1/6 plus the common difference, which is 2/3, and then we've got n minus 1, and that's our formula. Okay. Now when I move to the next couple here, and we're going to cross 7 off, so I'll just put this right over top. Oh, one underneath. We'll get that. There we go. Okay, so you can cross 7 off. But number 6 here, it says for each sequence, write a recursive formula. So now you want to make sure you're focused on the recursive formulas. And so that's going to be this one here if it's arithmetic, and this one here if it's geometric. So we'll try to figure out which is which. Again, we got fractions there, so let's start over here. And it's kind of hard to tell what's happening because we have decimals, but a lot of people like decimals more than fractions. So we'll start by looking at these numbers here. And if you're really struggling, we can use our calculator. Okay, so I've got my calculator here. Let's say I think maybe it's arithmetic. I'm going to take 3.37. I take the second term and I subtract the first term. And I check what that common difference would be, 0.23. And then I want to see if that holds up. So if I start with 3.14 and I add 0.23, that gets me the second term. We already know that. And then I add 0.23 again. Does that get me the third term? And it does. And then I add 0.23 again. If I continue to add 0.23, it's working here. So this one, if we're adding the same thing each time, it's arithmetic. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to write that. And you can then see that your common difference here was 0.23. So I want to grab this arithmetic here, and I'm going to write a sub 1 equals, and you just write the first term. So my first term was 3.14. And then down here, you just write a sub n equals a sub n minus 1 plus, and then you put the common difference in this spot. So we replace our first term, like our a sub 1 there, and then we replace our d with the number that we found. And that is your formula. Okay, and we're going to do a similar thing over here. So if we look over at this one, the denominator's staying the same all the time, so you can just focus on the numerator, and it looks like this numerator is getting multiplied by 3. And that holds up here. It's multiplied by 3 and multiplied by 3. So this is going to be geometric. And our R value, what we're multiplying by, when it's a fraction, we can write it as a fraction. The numerator is multiplied by 3. And the denominator, we're just multiplying by 1. So if it's 3 over 1, we don't have to write the divided by 1 there, and we can just write that our R value is 3 and get there. Okay? But if you write 3 over 1, it's the same thing. So we're looking at this geometric one. So we want to write our g sub 1 equals, and our first term is 2/5. So we just write that down, then we write g sub n equals g sub n minus 1. So this is saying to get the next term, you take the previous term and we multiply by r, and our r is 3, so times 3. And that's your answer.